Yeah, so my journey started when I was about 5 years old or so. My family moved us from San Jose, California to St. Louis, Missouri, because my dad's sister, who was my aunt, owned a restaurant. So he moved us there so he can help run that restaurant. Um, when we got over there, everything was great. He was prospering, the business was doing well. He was in his mid 20s or so, and I believe that within about a year or so, he was just a young guy. I think he got caught up with his ego. He's doing well. And within about a year, he started drinking. So that's the beginning of his alcoholism. And that's when all of our lives changed. Flash forward about when I was 6 years old, we started seeing changes in him. He started arguing with my mom more often. He would be out partying. He started drinking, smoking, and then the gambling came. So every week he was out gambling, and you would see him talking to women, and just the whole family dynamic started to shift quite a bit. And around this time, I remember having a woman come pick me up from my house, and she would, she's a super nice lady. I called her auntie, and she took me to the carnival, took me shopping, bought me toys, all this fun stuff. And that night she took me home. And she brought me home, dropped me off. She's standing at my right from my door here. And for some reason, my dad was home. My dad's never home. He usually works like 16-hour days. And that day, he happened to be at home. And he met her at the door. And I remember turning on a movie called Willow. I still remember that vividly. And I was sitting there watching, and I remember looking out the door, and I see them just staring at each other intensely, right? And it was, I don't know if it, at the time I was 6 years old, I didn't know if it was lust or if it was something crazy. But long story short, my mom came home, and they had a huge argument that night. And prior to this, I really never experienced my mom and dad arguing at home. And it was a fierce argument. And I remember him, running after her and, just pleading, just telling her everything's fine, and just being a very gentle person towards her. Slowly, as the months goes by, I find out that that was his girlfriend. So he had cheated on my mom. He found a mistress, and this mistress was a huge part of our lives. Those little arguments with my mom and dad escalated into, throwing things across the room, breaking things, and just the words got sharper and more harsh to each other. And the crazy part was this: his mistress would he would spend one night at our house and then spend the night at her house the following night, and so he would bounce and toggle back between the two homes. And this lady would come to my house and pick my mom up, pick us up, and we would go shopping together. We'd go have meals together. And so as a 6-year-old, I was kind of just confused, right? I was thinking like, okay, is she a friend? Is my mom okay with this? Why is my mom okay with this? And it was just a normal thing in our household. So flash forward as that year progresses, the fights turn into very physical altercations. I remember sitting in my room and being awoken by screaming. And at the time, I was 6, 7 years old or so, and it was always on a school night. And I hear a slap. My mom's screeching, calling my name. I run downstairs, I hop on his neck, and I try to stop my dad from beating my mom, and he just kept on going at her. I remember trembling and having panic attacks for the first time at the age of 6 or 7. And I remember just looking at his eyes, and he just wasn't himself. And I don't know if it's alcoholism or if he just looked possessed. From there, it just kept on escalating and escalating and escalating. It became more frequent. I would witness him abusing her 2-3 times a week. One night I saw him throw a butcher knife at her and then chase after her with a knife, and he would just punch her and slap her. And being a 7-year-old at the time, I was helpless. I was, this big, and just there's nothing I can do to save her, right? On this particular night, I was laying on the bed. They were arguing. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was ready for school the next morning. I was going to go off to camp for a couple days for the first time, and I was already anxious, but somehow I was able to fall asleep while they're arguing. Usually I don't fall asleep while they're arguing. I'm always at the door just watching them and listening to see when it would de-escalate so that my mom can, go to sleep and I can go to sleep, and I wouldn't have to worry that she was not okay. I fell asleep on the bed, and I'm awakened at around 2 o'clock with the bed shaking, and I hear like muffled sounds. And I remember I looked over to my right, and the first thing I see is a gun, a black gun. and the muffled sounds were coming from my mom's mouth. The barrel was halfway in her mouth. She was crying, tears dripping down her eyes, and she was looking at me like this, trying to get my attention. And I just remember looking at my dad, and he just lost it. He was telling her, I'm going to kill you, just all these horrible things. And I just remember freezing up. And at that moment, I usually I'm able to come out and try to protect her and that kind of thing. But at this very moment, I froze up. I was petrified. I was horrified. And, things like this. And, after that, they got up and they argued some more. He kept on waving the gun around. And so 3 hours of this goes on. It's about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And at 7, I'd have to wake up and go to camp. I'd be sent off for 5 days. And I remember them packing my stuff up at the next morning, acting like nothing happened. Like there was never a fight. There was never a gun involved. My mom kissed me goodbye, packed my stuff, and sent me off to camp. So for the next 5 days or so, I'm sitting there scared to death. I didn't know if my mom would be alive if I came back. I didn't know if my dad would be in jail. And so the 5 days were just torture. I'd have to walk around and see the counselors and teachers and just put on a happy face. And in the back of my mind, I'm just anxious and worried. So the beatings and the abuse went on for quite a few years after that. Later on that year, around 7.5 or so, my mom moved us. She said, "Hey, we're going to get away from this man. He's been, you've obviously seen what he's been doing to me." And so we picked up and we left. We moved back to San Jose. And when I got to San Jose, I realized that my mom was pregnant. And so she might have been a few months pregnant at that time with my little brother, Travis. And life was good. I lived with my grandma, with my uncle. They took care of us, and there was love and nurturing in the house. There was routine, there was structure, and we were thriving for a while. Went back to school, got along with the friends and everything. And then, slowly my mom ends up delivering my brother, Travis. I'm grateful for him. He's so wonderful. He's my closest brother. And I start getting phone calls every day, and it turns out to be my father, right? So he calls us every single day. I had no clue he was still talking to my mom, but as a young child, I was just happy to hear from my dad. And every day he would keep on calling me and telling me all these great stories. He's like, "Hey, if you guys come back home, tell your mom to take you back home. I'll buy you a waterbed." And at the time, waterbeds were everything, right? That was like the jam. And so I kept on telling my mom, I'm like, "Hey, Mom, we're going to go back. We should go back to Dad. I think he's changed. I think he's settled down." And sure enough, a couple months after that, we hear a door knock at my grandma's house. And he comes in with flowers, and he's the man, and my mom's smiling, and all these things. I remember just feeling so happy. My grandma was totally against it. She didn't want us to leave, but somehow, my mom was manipulated back into going home with him. And on that flight back home, I saw them holding hands, and I just felt like, okay, this is how a family is supposed to be. And I think we have a second chance at this, right? We get back to the airport, and he drives us home, and we're driving to this far off land somewhere because this house is like 50 minutes away from the airport, and it was not even the neighborhood that I used to live in. And so he's like, "I got you guys a new apartment, and everything's going to be great." So we pull into the apartment, and sure enough, in my room, there's this beautiful waterbed, right, that he promised. Everything was exactly as he said. So I'm like, "Bet, this is great. This is a good life." So we all settle in. I'm sleeping for the first time, like a full night of sleep with my parents in the house. Because usually when they're in the house, I'm never sleeping. And I hear giggles, and I'm like, "Oh man, this is the life." Things are starting to come together. And I walk out and I peek around the door, and I see my dad on the ground in front of the fireplace. And I thought, okay, he's with my mom. They're reconnecting. To my horror, it ended up being his mistress, the lady that came into our lives and caused all these problems. He was actually making out with her and doing things in front of this fireplace. Meanwhile, my mom is in the other room with her door shut. And I remember just being so disappointed and seeing this, and I just couldn't imagine a human being treating another person this way. And so I found out later that we ended up moving into her house. That was her apartment that he moved my mom and me into. She lived there. And so this went on for a few months. And, I remember hearing fights at home where my dad would come home and hold his marriage certificate and burn it and tell me, "Hey, Tony, me and your mom are done." And I remember times where my mom would have me call my dad and tell him, hey, come home now. Mom's got a gun. She's going to kill herself. And so they used me as a pawn in between to kind of like it was a power play. And being 8 years old and having a newborn brother, it was absolutely horrifying for me. And, within about 2 to 3 months or so, they would fight consistently. And then another night, I'm in the middle of the night, I'm sleeping, and I wake up to screams, and he's beating her right next to me. And I grabbed her, and I took her. We had this bathroom where there's 2 doors. I took her into this bathroom, this side. We locked the door, and we ran out the other side. And he chased us down. He grabbed her by the hair, and he bit her face. He bit her with just the gnarliest, nastiest bruise on her face. And so, I'm stuck again trying to defend my mom, and I can't do anything about it. I've got a crying little brother that's an infant in the house. And he brings me outside after everything kind of settles down, and he kind of holds me and rocks me like this, and he tells me, I did this because I love your mother. It's all her fault. So my childhood growing up was pretty volatile. It was just full of anxiety and worry and not knowing if my mom would be alive the next morning. Flash forward a few years later, things start to settle down. My dad, one day, spontaneously, he ends up having a baby with this mistress, right? So my half-brother comes out, and he announces to my family, like, hey, me and my mistress are breaking up, but I have to have one last dinner with her. I have to see her one last time and my son before they move back to Oklahoma. And I'm like, this is great. Okay, well, we have a third chance here, right? This may be better than the second time. So one night he comes up to me, he says, hey, Tony, hop in the car with me. We're going to go to the mistress's house and just hang out for a little bit. I'm going to say bye, and then we're just going to go back home. And I'm like, okay, great. This is happening, right? If they break up and this is official and everything's cool. He comes into the house. We pull up. He walks up to the doorway, and he told me to stay in the car. I said, okay, fine, I'll stay in the car. Being a curious 8-year-old, I walk and I get out of the car, and I just want to see if this is legit or not, or if this is really going to happen. And I walk around the door, and as I walk in the door, I hear screaming, yelling, just like the most terrifying screams you'll ever hear. And I see him with his arm up like this, and he's got a gun, and he's got his gun pointed directly pressed against her head. And he's got my half-brother in his left arm, and he's pointed at her like this, and he's telling her, like, I'm taking this baby with me. And so then he looks at me, and then he looks back down, and I hear a click. So he pulls the trigger. The bullet gets stuck in the gun, and I'm sitting there screaming. I'm trembling. My knees buckle. And he turns around and he pulls out a revolver. And this time when he pulls out a revolver and he points at her, he looks at me one more time, and I'm sitting here bawling, and I start getting like this panic attack. And he looks back at her and he puts the gun away, and we all run back into the car. On the car ride home, the cops pull us over, and I watch my dad get hauled off with handcuffs. The baby is screaming. The cops are holding my half-brother. And I'm like, well, I don't know where to go from here. As an 8-year-old, I have no clue. I have no hope. I just was extremely, extremely sad about this situation. And then, we come back home, and my mom takes him back. He's in jail for a good while. He gets out of jail, and she takes him back, and we have a fake, happy little family. And this went on for a couple of years. And then when I turned 12 or so, we moved into these apartments, right? And we were dirt poor. I'm talking about poverty. I shared a twin bed with 3 of my siblings, and it was cockroach infested. When you're sleeping at nighttime, you get a cockroach crawling up into your mouth and everything. And my dad and my mom started a restaurant, and they made no money. And so we had winters with no heat. We had summers with no AC. We barely had enough food to eat. And, they were at work for 16 or 17 hours a day. And so being a 12-year-old, I'm right around middle school age. I start turning to what I know is my friends on the street. I start turning to doing drugs, selling drugs. We start stealing. We start robbing. We start gambling. We do all these types of things, right? And so they were my family. And this was like the turning transition point in my life where I really started to feel like I had acceptance. I had a group of people that understood what I was going through. The drugs went from, soft drugs over to selling cocaine, over to doing all these other things. And, that street life caught up to me. Right around 13 years old or so, we're fighting with people all the time. In St. Louis, Missouri, there's not really set gangs. There's just neighborhoods around you. And in any place you turn to, there's a rival gang or a rival neighborhood. So we'd be fighting all the time. We're always fighting. And I remember, taking my brother to the ice skating rink, a local ice skating rink, and we got into fights with, rival gang members. And I'm outside in the parking lot. We're hanging out. I've got my, maybe 4-year-old brother at the time, because I wasn't allowed to leave the house. We skipped the house and we just went outside. And shots started ringing out. So I have to grab my little brother. We're running through the woods behind the ice skating rink. There's some wooded area, and just gunshots ringing out. Bang, 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 bang. And I remember carrying my little brother running through with my friends. And that was my experience at 13 years old. Now, mind you, I'm out in the streets doing God knows what. And when I get home, I'm the perfect child, right? Growing up in an Asian family, you're expected as the oldest or the eldest to handle everything. You wash the dishes, you clean the clothes, you feed the family, you make sure homework's done, you take care of everyone in the house. And so the moment I got back in the house, my dad's like, hey, how was school? Oh, school was great, homework was good. And, we lived that life. And we did that for, a number of years. And during this time, my dad, his drinking started to increase and gradually become a lot worse because our business was doing nothing. And some days he'd bring home $50 from a full day's of work. And he started drinking a lot. He started to lose his mind quite a bit. And so from him losing his mind and drinking, 30 beers a day, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes, he'd come home and he'd just be pissed off already. And when he was home, he'd make sure that I'm home. And just to be his muse, you got to be kind of on your toes, always walking on eggshells. And my mom was the same way. When my dad stepped his foot in the house, she would always be serving him. There's always like, hey, make sure dad's good, make sure your dad's good. And it could be a cultural thing too, because in my culture, that's how you treat the men. When I turned 13 or 14 or so, running the streets, things started to escalate quite a bit. I started, having friends that drove, so we started going to different neighborhoods and started meeting different people. At this particular point, I had an ex-girlfriend that lived, maybe a couple blocks down the street from us, and she invited us over. So I'm like, oh, ex-girlfriend, we're still friends, we're cool. So she invites us over, and when we get there, there's these 2 guys there, right? These 2 guys are from some gang. Never met them before. It's the Asian gang over there. And I'm sitting there having a great time, and we're talking, and all of a sudden I start getting F-bombed, and they start, giving us a lot of problems. And so I was like, okay, cool, no worries. My cousin and I get up, we walk home. We're maybe 5 blocks down the street. I go home and grab my dad's gun. We come back and, we assess the situation. So I get back over to the pool. They're popping off at the mouth. There's, just all these things being spewed. And being 14, hormones started kicking in. Puberty started kicking in. In my foolishness, I walked up to the guy and I pulled and cocked out the gun. It was a .45. I cocked the gun and I put it right against his forehead. At this point, when these things happen to you, they say life flashes before your eyes. This wasn't the case for me. I looked him, at him dead in the eyes, and the words that came out of his mouth next was, "If you're a man, go ahead and pull the trigger." And so I'm sitting there trembling, my hands are shaking, and I've got this gun cocked, and it doesn't take much to pull the trigger on a gun that's loaded. And that split second, I look him in the eyes, and the first thought that came to my mind was, all right, let me show you. So as I'm starting to steady my hand, I start squeezing, and I hear shrieking sounds from this young lady that was walking her dog right next to us. She ran up the stairs and said, it's a gun. And so everything snapped, right? Everything just kind of, I reset. I'm like, okay, good. The cops are coming. That's the first thing I worried about. I wasn't worried about shooting this man. I was worried about the cops coming and taking me to jail. So we hop back in the car, we go home, and we act like nothing happened, right? So these are the types of experiences that it kind of escalated into because, I didn't have any family members at home to guide me. My mom was home sometimes, but we lived in a very volatile type of situation, and I had to find a way to survive. Looking back now, I'm extremely ashamed of that situation. But from that situation later on down the road, when I turned 15, which was about a year and a half later, I'm in high school. I meet this guy from Norway, and he's super buff, nice guy, and we became really close friends. He eventually introduced me to his sister, and he said, "Hey, can you take my sister to this Valentine's Day dance?" So we're out here. I'm super excited. I get to take a girl out for the first time, and she comes and we take her out, and we didn't really feel each other much, so kind of like let that kind of slide for a little while. Flash forward maybe a year later, I bump into her at a restaurant, and we start talking again. And lo and behold, this was the first major blessing in my life, was when I met her, right? She came to me at a time in my life where I was making bad decisions. I was doing drugs. I was stealing. I was robbing cars. We did home invasions. We did all these crazy things. And I didn't know that that was wrong. I thought that was fine because, if my parents can't offer me a life where they feed me and they give me money to buy clothes and all these other flashy things I thought were important, then I'm going to go get it myself. And so when I met this young lady, she came from a good family. Her parents were business owners, and they were super calm and collected. She had morals and values, and that was something I lacked. So she became my mom in a way, right? So she taught me right from wrong. She showed me who to talk to, what to stay away from. And it was because of her that in my junior year of high school, I let go of all of these things. I let go of this lifestyle. She would come to my house and watch me brush my sister's hair, take care of the family. And she said, "This is the real you. What are you doing out here with these people? Why are you stealing? You're not a thug." And quite honestly, I'm not a thug. I was always the shortest guy. I was the thinker. I was like the hustler. I was out there trying to make money. And so, she started pointing these things out to me. She said, "You're kind. You're blessed. You have these little siblings. You're like a father figure to them. Like you got to set your life straight." And over time, she started to teach me these things. It's one of those things now where I can't really explain why she came into my life and how good she was to me. And as good as she was to me, I ended up cheating on her. I cheated on her with this other girl. And the first time I did it, it was fine. We were young. We chalked it up as, inexperience. You never dated too many girls. This is normal. And she was wise enough to tell me this, and she understood this. My dad hated her. My dad absolutely hated her. My dad hated any girl that didn't serve him, that didn't kiss up to him, that didn't feed his ego. And so my dad, being the man he is, stand-up character, alcoholic, he decided to send me on a date with another girl, right? And so I've already made this mistake once. I've already, cheated on my girlfriend. He sees this girl that he's friends with from a while back, and he sets us up on a date. He gives us money. He gives me money and tells me where to go, what time to pick her up. And at this time, I had not been talking to my dad for about 3 years. I moved out of the house pretty early. And just by him talking to me, I was like, wow, maybe we can mend this relationship. Why is he talking to me all of a sudden? How come everything's kind of coming together? Like he's starting to relate to me. We're talking without screaming. And he tells me this, and being stupid as I am, I was like, oh, let me please him. Like without even knowing, I was like, let me please him. Let me do what he tells me to do. So I take this young lady out on a date. And during the date, she's asking me all these crazy things like, does your girlfriend cook for you? Is she nice to you? And she's asking me these weird things that you don't talk about on a date. Get home, we say our goodbyes, and turns out this girl is a family friend. And so she was at my cousin's house. I walk into my cousin's house after the date, and my aunt's standing there. She's super disappointed. She's like, hey, your girlfriend just called. And I was like, stop messing around. I got super scared. I was like, stop messing around. That's not true. And so she's like, no, your girlfriend knows that you've been out on this date. So I come home, and my girlfriend asks, like, everything's normal. And we start fighting. She starts throwing plates across the room. And at one point, she locks herself in the room. And so I'm out here, and I'm thinking, it's not a big deal because I've done this before. I've cheated before, and I got, no repercussions from it. And so I'm sitting there hanging out, and then I hear this gigantic thud or crash, right? And the mirror breaks, and she's screaming, and she's like, hey, she's like, and she locked the door, so I couldn't get into the room. And so I remember panicking, so I kicked down the door, I broke it down, and I came in there, and there's blood everywhere. Somehow, the way she punched it, it sliced her arm sideways about 5 inches or so, and she's starting to bleed out. Her body started convulsing. She started going through shock. And so I remember grabbing her, and she started fainting. She started blacking out, and she started saying like how much she missed her parents. And so I called 911, and the first thing 911, the police do is they come in. They thought it was a domestic violence case. So they come in with guns drawn. They got me on the floor, and I'm just pleading with them to let them know that, hey, she's hurt. She needs to go to the hospital ASAP before she dies. And so through that experience, I never realized how much my actions could affect someone. And I didn't understand why, after seeing my dad experience this and go through that nightmare as a child, how could I possibly, as a man, follow his footsteps? I became a raging alcoholic as well. I also became, addicted to chaos and being a womanizer and all these things. I actually followed him to a T, and I did not realize that. And so through that blessing and that experience that my wife showed me, once again, this woman showed me again that this is what happens if you do not pay attention to your actions, and this is how much you can affect people. And I happen to hurt the person that I actually love the most. And so I'm 18, 19 years old or so, and life is starting to get better. I cut communication and ties with my father, because it was, every time I talked to my father, there was another problem. So we cut communication. I'm living great for a while. I go back to college. My wife goes to college, and we're doing fine. We a couple years later, we graduate, and I pick up my bags and we head off to California. And so in 2008, we moved to California in Orange County, and we moved on the day that they announced that the housing market would crash, right? So I'm like, oh, my brother-in-law is freaking out. And I get here, and we find an apartment. Everything's great. I got my first job, high-paying job, and I was finally able to feed my family. I was able to take care of my wife. We didn't have to struggle anymore. I worked in the medical field for 10, 15 years, and I remember just feeling so grateful. And then just as these things are happening, I get laid off from my job. So, I put in all this blood, sweat, and tears all these years into this job, and I get laid off. Well, out of my control, great. And so during this time that I got laid off, something was speaking to me, right? Something was telling me like, hey, my wife, well, number one, my wife would always tell me that if you're so unhappy with this, how come you're stuck in this job? How come you don't go out? You have all these talents. You have all these things inside of you that you can go out and start your own business. You can do whatever. And I never listened to her, because I said, well, if I do this, who's going to take care of us, right? So I was fighting it for 10, 15 years or so. And when I finally got laid off, I tried everything in my power to get back into a job, to try to get back into doing what I was doing, and nothing helps. And so now I'm unemployed. My wife finds out she's pregnant. And so, I bought a condo at the time. And so I've got a mortgage, a baby coming. I lost my job. I have around $2,500, about $3,000 left in my savings account. And so I said, okay, great. I'm gonna take a leap of faith. I'm gonna go ahead and, give it a shot. And so I take $2,500. I'm about to start an eBay store, and I wire the money off to this guy in Singapore to try to buy graphing calculators to flip and sell here on eBay. And so I wire him the money, everything's great, and after 5 days, he doesn't respond. 10 days, he doesn't respond. I'm frantic at this point because I've got a very pregnant wife to take care of, and turns out he was a scam artist, right? He took $2,500 out of my life savings, took everything. I remember coming home and letting her know, and that walk of shame, telling your wife that you've lost every single dollar that you had. I came up to her and I said, hey, honey, I lost all this money. That guy was fake. It was too good to be true. And I remember her belly being just gigantic, and she had a bowl of cereal in her belly, and she turns to me and she goes, hey, stop being a little wuss, right? But she uses a different word, not too nice of a word. And she says, now you know what not to do. Just go out there and do it again. Just try it again. It's not a big deal. We'll be fine. And mind you, thank God for the U.S. government, because I was able to get on WIC, the WIC program, the Women, Infant, and Children's program. I was able to get on food stamps. And so with these programs, I would ride my scooter all the time out to get cereal and government cheese and all this peanut butter and all that stuff they give you. And she gave me confidence. So I was able to, okay, I'm going to get back on the horse and do this. And so every day I'd ride my scooter out to the WIC office and come back, and there was this homeless guy in front of the In-N-Out Burger off El Toro in Lake Forest. And once a week, I remember, I had enough money to treat myself to a burger. So I'd go in there and I'd buy one for myself, I'd buy one for him, and I'd come out there and stand with this homeless man and just talk. We would just talk. I'd ask him where he came from, what's going on. Had a similar story to myself. And this went on for a good 6 months, about 7 months or so. And during this time, mind you, we had $500 left. I came back home. I took the $500 and I put it towards other products to sell. And lo and behold, the business started taking off. I started getting 10, 15, 20, 30 sales a day. And I was like, okay, we're starting to make enough money. I can take care of my family. I can pay my mortgage. I can feed my wife is about to deliver in the next month or so. Business is going great. And then one day, everything stops. I start getting complaints from customers, and it turns out that, I've got bad supplies, yada, 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 whatever. And I get kicked off of eBay. And so now I'm back to square one, but this time I'm back to square one with a deep depression. I was way worse off than I was prior to getting in there, because I tasted it. I knew that, there's something here. I'm sitting here crying again with her. I'm explaining to her what happened. And at this point, she's a few days away from giving birth to my son. So the day before we're scheduled for a C-section, we come home from a meal with my mom, and I get home and I go out to the garage and open the garage door, and I've got my dog locked up in there. So I've got my dog on a leash so that she doesn't run around. She's super anxious, and so I've got her on a leash. I said, let me go grab the dog real quick. You guys go in the house. So I walk in, I open the garage door, and the dog is dead. My dog's hanging with the leash around her neck, just purple, and she found a way to jump on the couch and got twisted up in there. And so I'm sitting here crying and dealing with my dog. And so I pick her up and I bring her inside. I put her in a box, sitting like this. My mom's on this side, my wife's on this side. We're sitting there crying and bawling our eyes out, and then I hear creaking sounds in my kitchen. And so I walk over to the kitchen, and we sprung this gigantic slab leak. There's water flowing everywhere. The floor is lifted up. And mind you, this is the day before we're supposed to give birth to this child. And so I'm stuck here with the dead dog, with the leaking house. And so I grab all of our stuff and put them in black trash bags, not knowing where we're going to take our stuff. But I couldn't do anything about it. So we packed our car up with all the trash bags. I packed up all my daughter's toys and everything. And the next morning we go and deliver. And thank God the hospital keeps you there for 2 or 3 days, because in those 2 or 3 days I had no place to stay. So I arranged for a motel. We bring my son home, and for the next 5 months, we're in this motel. I'm back to square one now. I'm displaced from my home. I don't have a savings. My business that was on eBay is completely gone. I've got a wife that just had a C-section and she's cut wide open. I've got a 3-year-old daughter that has no clue what's happening. And I began this new journey in this motel room. And man, in this motel room, I think is where everything's shifted for me for a third time in my life, right? In this motel room is where I understood what surrender meant. This is where I let go of everything that I ever knew. I let go of my finances. I let go of my worries. And I just woke up every morning and just tried to enjoy that we were still here, that thank God we had food stamps and the WIC program still, and that my family was fed. And so, we're hanging out and ran low on finances again. And we ended up saying, hey, you know what? We're going to take everything we have and we're going to buy Christmas gifts for everyone. And mind you, Christmas has always been a very sore subject for my wife and I. We didn't believe in Christ at the time, and so Christmas was just a very sad day for poor people. That's essentially what it is on Christmas. You watch everyone get gifts and you don't get anything, and you're just, it's a bad holiday. But this particular holiday, we took $500 that we had left, and we bought gifts for our friends, we bought gifts for our families, and we let go of everything. We surrendered everything, and we said, you know what, whatever happens here happens. And then I'm in the hotel room, and the second or third month or so, my mom owns a restaurant in another country, and I said, you know what, let me pick up my laptop. She's got an old school business. Let me try to create a website for her. So I go on these do-it-yourself website builders, and I built her a website, and I was like, hey, this looks pretty darn good, right? This is turning out pretty nice. And being ignorant and stupid as I was, I hopped on Craigslist and started putting ads out, advertising myself as a web designer. And within the first day or two, I started getting phone calls. One phone call turned into 5 phone calls turned into 30 phone calls. And now I've got, all of a sudden, out of this motel room, I've got this sprawling business. I've got customers and clients and all these things coming through. I was like, this is life-changing. This is crazy. And, I just can't imagine anyone paying me, a guy that has no skill or talent in this field, to build them a website, right? So got off of WIC, got off of food stamps in that motel room, and things were starting to look better. Things were starting to look up. And so I was sleeping one night in this same motel room, feeding after I fed my son. It was like maybe midnight, 1 o'clock or so. I'm sitting there dead asleep. And I get this weird dream, right? And in this dream, I saw a man, long hair, beard, on a cloud, just kind of floating above me like this. And I remember looking up to him, and he goes, Tony, whatever you're doing, just keep on doing it. Whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. And then I wake up, and I woke up and I started scribbling it down, because I always forget what I'm dreaming about. I scribbled it down, and I told my wife, I said, hey, can you believe this stuff? This is crazy, right? I'm a hardcore atheist at this point. I'm an atheist to the end. I grew up Buddhist. We had all these crazy rituals, and in our family, we used to worship these statues. And there's 3 guys, and there's one guy that represents like prosperity or money or something. So I was like, he's got a beard, he's got long hair, it must be him. So I was like, oh, this must be something. And when I tell you I was atheist, I'm atheist to the point where I got into fist fights with people that would tell me and condemn me and let me know that I was going to hell. So this is how much of a non-believer I was at this time. I was that bitter. And so I get this dream, and then every night follows. And then I'm sitting here for the first time in my life. I prayed, and I said, hey, whoever you are out there, I don't know what your name is, but I'm asking you to please continue helping me. I think I'm on the right track. If you can just show me a sign. I kept on asking, show me a sign, show me a sign. And every time I asked for a specific sign, within a day or two, I'd see the sign come to fruition. I was like, is it God? I wouldn't dare say the J word, because at the time, the J word meant nothing to me. It meant, I despised it, because J word never came and helped me. The word Jesus was not someone I knew. I was very estranged from Mr. J word, right? And so I prayed to God. A few months goes by, we moved back into our home, and I get a phone call out of the blue from my friend Victor. And now my friend Victor is a guy I used to train jiu-jitsu with maybe 7 years prior to that. And I have not talked to him not one day since. He calls me out of the blue. He says, hey, I heard from a friend that you're building websites. And so I said, oh, yeah, I'm doing that now. I'm kind of dabbling. He says, well, would you be interested in talking to my friend Lisa? She needs a website. Would you talk to her? Because I'm too busy. I can't help her with that. I said, sure. So I connect with this lady named Lisa. Her name's Lisa Balesi. And she says, hey, come to my house. Let's have a meeting. I'll tell you all about it. Come to find out, when I get to her house, Lisa Balesi and her husband, Denny, started a church called Coast Hills over in Aliso Viejo. And it was for her church program. It was for her church. It was building a website for her. And they had this program back in the day called the Kingdom Assignment. And she wanted to, revive that. The Kingdom Assignment was pretty much a challenge they gave to their congregation, where they gave 100 members $100 and told them to multiply this in the name of Christ to further the kingdom. It was a big thing back in the day, but I wasn't around. I was anti everything at the time. So I'm sitting there talking to her, and she says, hey, Tony, you know what? Before we go any further with the project, why don't you come out to the church on Sunday, which was this was a Friday, 2 days later to church. And I said, yeah, Lisa, I don't think I need to go to the church to kind of do this project, because I was very uneasy by the church. I've never had a good relationship with the church. I used to mock the church, to be honest with you. And I said, okay, fine. Let me come out. Give me the address. And so 2 days later, I said, hey, I told my wife, I said, can you please take me and go with me to the church? I feel super creepy here. I don't know if they're a bunch of Bible thumping, condemning, crazy people. And so she said, fine. And mind you, she's Buddhist. She's hardcore Buddhist. She grew up Buddhist. She's atheist as well. And so the two of us kind of hold hands, and we're kind of nervous walking into the church. And right when we walk in, you smell donuts, right? And you see a table full of free donuts. Being from the background I'm from, no one gives you free food, right? Without wanting something. So, we go to this church. To the right, there's a table where you can just make sandwiches for the homeless. And I was like, this is just unreal. are people really this happy, right? I questioned it right off the bat. In my mind, I'm starting to hear all these weird thoughts. I come into the left side here and they have childcare. So I brought my daughter in there and I was like, I don't know if I should leave my daughter with these crazy people. Maybe they're cults, right? It's part of this huge cult. Drop my daughter off and I sit in this church, highly skeptical. And I remember his name was Pastor Chet. Pastor Chet, he came out and he's kind of like a surfer type of dude. And he came out and he had this sermon and he talked about the missions that he did over in Africa and how he escaped death and how he saw poverty and how he saw miracles happen in Africa. And something about what he said really resonated with me about the poverty and about how the children grew up and about broken homes. Questions started popping up in my mind. My heart started to soften. I stopped having all these doubts and all these downright crazy things that came into my mind about the church. And it all got replaced with questions of, how did that happen? Did that really happen? Did this man get through all these crazy times? And how did these children get through all that? And I left church that day, didn't do 1 ounce of research, didn't take one photograph of the place, didn't know anything about it. And I just sat there just enamored, curious, a little scared, but just infatuated by it. I was just super obsessed with it in a way. So the following week we go again. The following week we keep on going. And Lisa's calling me. She's like, hey, did you take the pictures there? Did you know what we're doing? And I said, Lisa, I just got to keep on coming back. I don't know. I'm not done with my research yet. We just got to keep on coming. By the 3rd week, we come in there and I don't remember what the sermon was about, but Pastor Chet was talking about something, and I believe it was about broken homes and how the children of broken homes found their way, right? They were able to be redeemed and live a good life. And that really resonated with me. And at the end of the church, if you guys have never been before, at the end, some churches ask you, they say, hey, if you want to give your life to Jesus today, please stand up, right? And imagine standing up in front of hundreds of people, strangers, being scared to death, right? So I was like, nah, that sounds kind of lame to me. I don't think I'm going to do that. Because at this point, I had never even said the word Jesus. I never even validated the word Jesus. I never prayed to Jesus, right? I just prayed to God because that's all I knew. And so I'm sitting there and I'm hanging out and he delivers this message and I'm just like antsy, my hands are sweating. I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, do you hear what he said? Like, this is me, man. This is my life. And then he gets to the end and the music starts getting quiet. Lights turn off and he says, hey, is there anyone in this room that wants to give their life to Jesus today? Please stand up. And I'm sitting there looking down like this. And I remember just from my toes up, everything goes numb. My legs start to shake and my body's literally trembling at this point. And somehow my legs pulls me up and I'm standing. I'm kind of leaning against the front seat because I'm kind of lightheaded in a way, right? And my body's just real hot and it's just like sweating. And then I start bawling profusely, uncontrollable bawling. I'm talking about bawling since I was a kid growing up, I would cry, but I would always cry by myself in my room, right? I would never show anyone this. And even with my wife at the time, she's never seen me cry at this point. And I'm just crying, just uncontrollably, to the point where, snot comes out of your nose and that kind of thing. And I gave my life to Jesus that very day. All these people were staring at me. I remember feeling no fear. I remember feeling secure. I remember feeling patience, love, and the fear just went away out of my body. There was no worried about this person staring at me, this person judging me. What would my friends think from back home from the hood? What would they think, right? What would they think of Tony, the guy that used to almost kill someone, to being a guy that's a follower of Christ? Like all these things flashed during that couple minutes or so. I remember feeling relief from pressure, relief from all this baggage that was on my shoulders for so long. And I couldn't explain it to you at the time why or what that feeling was. And I remember sitting in the car with my wife driving home, completely silent, didn't talk about anything. She didn't mention it because she knows how prideful I was at the time. I'm a man, I don't cry. And we keep on going to church. 2 weeks later, I'm in church and we're hanging out and I'm absorbing this stuff. And he does his call at the end again. And I look over and my wife stands up unexpectedly. And she told me throughout this whole thing, she's like, you go first. I'm kind of iffy on this. I just don't want to go all the way in with you, but I'm curious as well. So she gets up and she gives her life to Christ that day as well. And I'm sitting there bawling and crying and just, holding on to her, and just a complete utter mess. And so in the same month, my wife and I gave our life to Christ at that church at Coast Hills. Now, you can call it coincidence, you can call it luck, you can call it the universe, whatever you want to call it, if you're a believer or non-believer. But the sequence of events that happened to me that brought me from watching my mom, seeing my mom with a gun in her mouth, to selling drugs, to me almost shooting someone, to my adultery, to my alcoholism, to all these things led me to that motel room that day. And I fought it, and I was depressed at the time, but it led me to that motel room where everything changed for me. This random motel room where I found some type of way, right? And at the time I didn't know how to explain it. And that brought me to getting a phone call randomly from my friend Victor after 7 years of not talking, to him recommending me to talk to this lady who ends up being the family that created this church and that invited me to go, not for church, she invited me to go research this place. From that to me sitting in one sermon, from that sermon to curiosity, from that curiosity to giving my life to Christ, there's no coincidence. If you're a scientific person, if the pattern continues, the same type of pattern, that's no longer a coincidence. That's no longer, it's truth. And I found truth that day. And everything that was before me, my identity, what people used to call me, they used to call me a gangbanger. They used to labeled me a thief. They used to label me a adulterer, schemer. Now, I had no more thoughts of this in my mind. I never thought of myself as that again. I became a brand new person, and I didn't have to explain that to anyone. I didn't need anyone's approval to have that. That was a peace that was given to me. And all these things, these times that my wife had been telling me, she's been telling me all these things. All of these things that she saw in me was what Christ saw in me. And that's what Christ called upon me. And all these talents that she told me about was what Christ gave me. And so my life completely changed. It completely changed that day. And so we get back. I never even end up finishing the website. A few months later, Lisa's like, hey, I scrapped the thing. We don't really need it anymore. We're going to go a different route. We're going to start a podcast and all this stuff. And I'm like, you just paid me all this money. You brought me out here and there's no website project. There's not really a project. She's like, no. And I'm like, okay, great. And so, never thought about it again. We're just trudging along, and, it's just been a roller coaster. And if you're a non-believer out there, you've never explored Christ, or you despised him and faith the way I used to, I can equate it to a roller coaster ride, right? You go to Six Flags, you see this amazing roller coasters that all your friends told you about. It's the most amazing thing ever. But you have fear, you're scared because it's unknown. You have no clue what that ride entails. You don't know if you're going to die on that ride or you fall out of the ride, right? And you get in there, the anticipation's there, you get this feeling, and then when you get on the ride, you got the ups that you go up, and you're anticipating the fall, and then you go down and you twists and turns. But there's so many battles in between, and having faith for me wasn't like, oh, turn on the switch, everything in your life is fantastic. It wasn't like, you have Jesus Christ now, everything's gonna be great in your life. No, it's like that roller coaster ride, right? We have these ups and we have these downs and we have these turns that give you headaches, and you have these spots where you're super happy, and then you have these spots where you're fearful. But when you get off that ride at the end, you do realize that, man, that was amazing. You get that rush, you get that feeling, and you're like, I'll try that again. And that's how I felt at the time. Was like, it's just a roller coaster ride. Flash forward till now, after having Christ in my life, I can honestly tell you that certain things have gotten much harder for me.
How long has it been, Tony?
Gosh, since I've given my life to Christ, I would say now it's been about 9 years or so. And I still don't know a lot of things. I read and I see things, but when I read the Bible now, I used to just skim through it, and now I'm reading it. And every time I read the same passage, or I read the same story, or when I'm telling these stories to my children, I see something new. I interpret something new, and I understand something new. And so, it's been a roller coaster. It's absolutely been ups and downs, but I'm so grateful for those nights where my mom was beaten. It's crazy to sound like that. I'm grateful for those nights. I'm grateful that she survived it. I'm grateful that I got into drugs. I'm grateful that I was an alcoholic. I'm grateful that I did commit adultery and I was a sleazy, slimy dude. Because if I wasn't that, I don't know where I would be now. I don't know if I would have found Christ or if Christ would have found me. And without that experience and that upbringing, I wouldn't be who I am today, and I wouldn't be as happy as I am today. I wouldn't be as grateful as I am today. Through Christ, it's everything. Now I have these two amazing, beautiful children that we trade stories with. We're out here, like my son, man, I'm telling you, goes to church and comes home, and I'll bring up a story about something in the Bible, and he'll correct me and he'll tell me, "No, Dad, that's not how it happened. This is how it happened." And he'll throw out a prayer that just blows me away. And being from the background I'm from, to see my children have this power and to see my children have this confidence and this love and this knowledge, it was like I handed them a superpower. And I broke the generational curse. Through Jesus, I was able to break that generational curse. If not, I'd be on the same path as my father, and then my son would see the same thing. I would be an abusive man doing all these crazy things, and my son would go through the exact same thing, and he would pass that to his child. And so, when you talk about generational curses, we're not talking about an actual curse that a witch gave you, right? It's a demonic thing that your ancestors send down through their thoughts and their actions. And it was my job, and I had to go through these things as a child. I had to be hurt. I had to go through trauma. I had to, have all this pain so that I can have today where I can take my son and my daughter out of that environment, and I can break that generational curse, and so that they can live the life that I never had, and then they can continue to prosper and have Jesus Christ and their faith to lean back on in this crazy world that we live in right now. And they have this superpower, and I tell them it's a superpower. And it's something that I wish and I pray that everyone can feel, because it's not something that is spoken about. It's not something that you can see or feel or hear. It's something that you feel. And it's changed my life. And I've been through very, very deep, dark places in the past 10 years. Recently, I've gone through some very major depression from just, living this earthly life and chasing earthly dreams and, going after things that people tell you that is good in this life, and not being grateful. And as a person that has faith, I lost my faith a few years ago. I lost it completely. I was back to being cold, hardened heart. And if you're not careful and you don't really immerse yourself in the right things and in the truth, you can fall right back off that train, and you can get right back into your old lifestyle, the way of thinking, and you can let this world, this earthly world, take over you. And man, it's bad. It becomes a very, very bad situation. And so, like I said, having faith for me isn't like this all one and all, fixes everything. It's actually more things that come into your life. There's more adversity, but then you're pushed through these adversities so that he can give you the power and the strength to lean on him, not to control things yourself, but for you to let go and let him take care of it. Because he's already promised these things to you. He's already written what is going to happen in your life. If I didn't know this now, thinking back, I thought I wanted to kill myself back in the day when I was a child. I was hoping he would just kill my mom and kill himself and kill me too. I was like, no, this is the way I thought back in the day. There's nothing to live for. And now, with Jesus Christ in your life, with faith, I can now honestly tell my kids that, hey, once you're done with this life, there's eternal life afterwards. I had this weird obsessive compulsive disorder where I kept on thinking about death all the time, and it can't be just lights out, right? It can't just be like, I'm dead, I can never see my kids again, I can never do these things. And through Jesus, he gives me that confidence, and he's written this. It's already been written. It's a promise to you. And so giving that gift to my children now and letting them know that one day I'll be gone, and I just pray that you can continue having this faith, and that when you fall and when you have hardships and when you fail And when you go through all these crazy things, that you can lean on him. You're not going to lean on me as a father. I'm a broken person, hurt, traumatized, but you're going to lean on the truth, and that truth never fades. And when I was Buddhist and I was worshiping these statues and praying and lighting incense and giving fruit, talking to ancestors and demonic entities, that's not the way, because you're idolizing a statue, for crying out loud, right? You're putting all your faith into multiple characters. It's like 1,000 different characters out there, and none of them lead you to the truth. And so now that we have the truth, I'm able to walk outside in complete confidence that whatever happens, happens. It's completely surrendered to a higher power, and that my Father, who loves me, will always take good care of me. And that's where I'm at now in my journey. I'm still learning a lot, but I urge everyone, especially my friends and everyone from my past, that I wish I can literally hand you this feeling that I have. I can bundle it into a gift wrap and give it to you on Christmas, and so you can experience the glory, the security, the love, and the hope that it gave me. Because every day you're going to go through doubt and go through disappointments. You're going to have. I mean, we can all blame our traumatic pasts. We can all blame our parents for all these problems we have. But it's up to you to find out who your Creator is and who your real Father is, and that's what it gave me.
Tony, are your parents still with us?
My parents are with us, yes. And my dad is still an alcoholic. My mom stayed with him after all these years. After I moved out, they had a little family. They still argued a lot. But a few years ago, he beat her again, and he had his gun out and all this stuff. This was literally 4 years ago. And so she left him. So my parents are still alive. My mom's here with me now in Orange County. But I am estranged from my father. We tried to talk. I've forgiven him. I've told him this, but every time alcohol touches his lips, he forgets, and it turns into this huge ordeal. So, but yeah, they're both still alive.
Tony, what would you say if your father was watching right now? What would you say to him?
If he was watching right now, I would tell him. I would say, it's okay. I understand. I forgive you. I truly forgive you. I understand what you've been through, and I understand that as a man with all the failures that came your way, and running from the war and not having a father yourself, I completely forgive you. And I wish you would receive that, because you're tormented every day. You have these devils and these demonic thoughts, and this alcohol is killing you. And you're missing out on your grandkids. And I just hope that you understand that it is okay. I forgive you, and I just want to move forward and to release you from those things that you went through, your demons, and that I'm okay. It didn't fade me, man. I'm good. I came out much better on the other side, and I can pass that on to my son and my daughter as well. So your damage didn't hurt me. Through Christ, I'm okay. So I forgive you. It's no big deal.
Tony, who is Jesus to you?
Man, Jesus to me is the person that was in the room with me, holding my hand while I was watching my mom get beat. He's the one that wiped the tears off my eyes when I was locked in the room, worried that she wouldn't make it the next morning. Jesus was the one that took my finger off that trigger that day where I was about to end someone's life and ruin my own. For me, Jesus is the one that sent my wonderful wife into my life so early and allowed her to save me and be my guide during the time that I was so lost. And Jesus, man, was the one that blessed me with these two beautiful children, and he gave them to me at the times that I needed them both the most. Life-changing moments for me. Those two kids saved my life. And for me, Jesus is the father I never had on this earth. The father that I always wanted, that was Jesus to me. He's everything. I would be nowhere. I'd be in jail or dead right now without Jesus Christ.
Tony, what would you say to your mom, if she was watching, and with that, to women also who may be in that same position that you've seen your mother be in?
For my mom, I see her once a year, even though we live locally, but I would tell her, enjoy your life. You've been in literally captivity and abuse for the past 30, 40 years. And I would tell her that I was right there with you the whole time. So many nights I wish I could have saved you from those beatings. And I couldn't do it, so I'm sorry for that. But I really want to let you know that the second half of your life is going to be a good one. And even though we don't talk and, you don't bring up or recognize or remember all these things that you blacked out, I took what I took so that, one day you can get out like you are now and that you can enjoy your life. And to the women out there that are being abused, I understand the power that the other person has over you, the manipulation. I understand, that you sometimes have kids involved and you feel like you can't leave, and that you take those beatings because you want best for your family, you want to keep your family together. But I tell you and I urge you that the moment you're able to get out, you take yourself and you leave, because those beatings, those slappings, and those little things turn into weapons and violence, and then it turns into guns, and eventually you lose your life, and that damage is way worse than what you're going through now. I urge you to find what I found, find Christ, because He's there with you. Every beating that you're receiving right now, or have received, every crazy fight you've been through, He's there, and He's not going to step in and stop it, but He's going to give you the strength to step away from it. And that's what I urge. Don't be around that stuff. It's continuing, and it's going to continue the generational curse, and you're going to pass it down to your kids, and your kids are going to be abused, and they're going to be okay with it, and then it's going to go on for generations. So I would just say, just get out at all costs. It's too important not to.
Tony, for those who are watching right now and are going through similar things that you have mentioned right now, and are ready to surrender their life to Jesus and desire what you have, could you pray for them as they're watching right now?
Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that through my story and my experiences today, that whoever's watching can understand clearly and see that this story that I have and this testimony is not a story of trauma or abuse or hurt. It's not a story of poverty or disadvantaged lifestyles. This is a story of triumph, Father, that you deliver this message to them and that you show them that I am a product of a broken home. I'm a product of abuse. I'm a product of alcoholism. I'm a product of the streets. And yet through Christ, I was able to get out of that situation. And I pray, Father, that each and every person that's watching this today, that my story reaches just one person that has gone through or is going through the experiences that I've had, and that they can have hope, and that this testimony gives them that hope and that courage to just take the plunge. You've got nothing to lose. Let them know this, Father, that you've always been there with them and that you've always been seeking them. It's not them that seeks you, but it's you that seeks them, and that you're always around, Father. And so I pray that you reach out to each and every one of these people and you just give them the strength to move forward with it. If they've been on the edge of it and they're curious and they're not quite committed yet, Father, just bless them with the strength and the courage to go for it, because your faith. You, Father, you're just everything to these people. And I'm telling you, Father, if you can just reach one person out there for me, that would be great. And I pray, Father, that you continue blessing Mission de la Fe with this platform and with the strength and energy and power to reach all ends of the earth and to continue showing these testimonies to every person out there, because these testimonies are from regular people that are hurt people, sinning people, people that have been through much worse things. And Father, I pray that you just lift and pour into each and every person that's watching this and just give them the strength to follow you, Father, and just to surrender. And in Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Tony, any last words for those who are watching on the other side of the screen?
I would say that don't let the world label you. The people that go through these traumas and these horrible events, worse than mine, you're not meant to give up. You're not typecasted as a black sheep. You're not typecasted. That's not who God made you to be. That's not who He told you are. That's not the promises that He has for you. So if you're a normal person like me right now, and you're living a horrible life, you got horrible things happening to you, to just consider it. Consider faith. Consider Jesus Christ, because you got nothing to lose. It can't get any worse for you. It can only get better. And so I would leave you with that. If I can be redeemed, if me, a person that's done horrible things, that has committed horrible crimes, and that could survive these types of things, you can definitely have that happen to you as well. It's just waiting for you. You just have to open your door and let it in.
Happy New Year, everybody. God bless you. This is Eric Villatoro, president and founder of Mission de la Fe. Just wanted to personally thank you for all your support in 2024. And thank you for being on this journey with us of creating the world's largest archive of Jesus' testimonies until His return. Our vision is that we will not only increase in the amount of testimonies that are heard worldwide, but that these testimonies will also become available in all languages so all nations can see of what the Lord is doing. What you are currently seeing on your screen is the names of people who have been financially supporting the production of these testimonies. If you would like to give in support of our ministry, please visit our website at missiondelafe.org. Now, I understand that not everybody can donate, and if you are unable to do so, it's totally fine. I want to thank you for praying. I want to thank you for the encouraging messages or emails that you have sent. Those two have greatly impacted our ministry, and I want to encourage you to continue to pray for us as we continue to do this. God bless you, and I pray that the Lord meets you and encounters you in fresh ways for this new year of 2025. Love you guys.